The men who ate her food never learned her name. For 11 months at FOB Sentinel, Petty Officer Second Class Ramona Castellanos had served over 20,000 meals to the most elite warriors in the American military, and not one of them had ever asked where she came from, what she could do, or why she watched them with eyes that tracked movement the way theirs did. They called her Cookie when they remembered she existed at all. What none of them knew, what she had stopped trying to tell anyone years ago, was that Ramona Castellanos could outshoot every man she fed. The galley came alive at 0400 every morning, and Romy was always there first. The industrial kitchen at the forward operating base in eastern Syria was her domain, the one place where her competence was undeniable, even if it was invisible. She moved through the prep work with mechanical precision, knife work so clean and fast that anyone watching closely might have noticed something unusual about her hands. But nobody ever watched the cook closely. By 0530, the first SEALs filtered in. They moved like predators even at rest, shoulders rolling, eyes scanning, bodies coiled with the kind of readiness that came from years of training and deployment. Romy served them eggs and bacon and fresh coffee, and they took their plates without looking at her face. She had memorized all of their names within her first week. None of them had learned hers. Senior Chief Vincent Harlow walked in at 0545, exactly as he did every morning. He was the senior enlisted SEAL at Sentinel, a man whose reputation preceded him through every room he entered. Romy watched him snap his fingers twice without looking in her direction. Coffee. Black. No words necessary for the help. She poured it and set it at his usual spot. He took it without acknowledgement and joined his teammates at the far table, where their conversation dropped to murmurs she could not hear. Before we continue with Rama's story, drop a comment and let us know what state you are watching from. Maybe you know someone whose real abilities have been overlooked, someone whose true worth went unseen. The only person at FOB Sentinel who ever used her name was Hospital Corpsman First Class Yolanda Okafor. Doc, as everyone called her, was the combat medic attached to the SEAL team, a woman who had earned her place among operators through blood and skill and years of proving herself. She understood something about being seen and unseen in spaces dominated by men. Thanks, Castellanos, Doc said that morning, taking her tray with a nod. The eggs are better when you make them. Romy allowed herself a small smile. She watched Doc move to sit alone, apart from the team, but close enough to respond if needed. Another woman navigating the invisible boundaries. After breakfast service, Romy found herself in the storage area behind the galley, checking inventory. Her hand paused over a case in the corner, dusty and forgotten. She knew what was inside without opening it. An M40A1 sniper rifle, outdated but functional, left behind by some previous rotation and never retrieved. Her fingers twitched, muscle memory urging her to check the action, inspect the bore, feel the familiar weight. She left it untouched and returned to her work. That evening, during dinner service, she overheard fragments of an intel briefing bleeding through the thin walls of the command building next door. Increased enemy activity in the region. Probing attacks on other compounds. Assessment. Low threat to Sentinel. Romy watched the northern ridgeline through the galley window as she scrubbed pots. 800 meters out, maybe a little more. Good elevation for overwatch. Natural cover in the rocks. She mentioned it to no one. Nobody asked the cook for tactical assessments. Late that night, after the galley was clean and dark, she sat on a rack and pulled a worn photograph from her pocket. Her younger brother Mateo, grinning in his navy dress whites. The photo taken the day he shipped to BUD/S, SEAL training. The hardest military program in the world. She whispered to the photo, "I am proud of you, little brother. Make it through." She did not tell him, in the letter she sent, that she had once wanted the same thing, that she had applied twice for rating conversion, twice been denied. Personnel needs, they said. The Navy needed cooks more than it needed another shooter. Outside, somewhere in the darkness beyond the wire, an engine rumbled briefly and then went silent. Romy heard it. She reported it to the watch commander. "Probably just a local vehicle. Cookie," he said without looking up from his magazine. "Go get some sleep." She returned to her rack, but she did not sleep. She lay awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to a silence that felt wrong. And 800 meters away, on the ridgeline she had noticed, figures moved through the darkness with binoculars trained on the compound below, counting guards, timing rotations, and planning something that would make everyone at FOB Sentinel remember the name of the cook. Romy woke at 0330, an hour before her alarm. Sleep had been shallow and broken, her mind refusing to release the sound of that engine in the darkness. She dressed in silence and slipped out of the berthing area while her fellow support sailors still slept. The compound gym was empty at this hour, exactly as she preferred. For 30 minutes, she pushed through a workout that would have broken most sailors. Pull-ups until her shoulders burned. Burpees until her lungs screamed. Core work that left her trembling. This was not the fitness routine of a cook. This was the conditioning of someone who had trained for something else entirely, something she had never been allowed to become. By 0400, she was in the galley, sweat-dried, uniform fresh, starting breakfast prep as if the past hour had never happened. The morning passed like every other morning. SEALs filed in, took their food, ignored her existence. Senior Chief Harlow snapped his fingers for coffee. The routine was so familiar it had become invisible, which was exactly how everyone preferred it. But something small changed that morning. Petty Officer 3rd Class Elias Vance, one of the younger SEALs, paused at the serving line. He was new to the team, only 3 months at Sentinel, and he still carried the eagerness of someone who had not yet learned to be cynical. "Hey," he said, actually meeting her eyes. "I never got your name." Romy blinked. The question was so unexpected that she almost forgot how to answer. "Castellanos," she said. "Ramona Castellanos." Vance nodded. "These eggs are really good, Castellanos. Thanks for keeping us fed." Before she could respond, a voice cut across the mess hall. "Vance, you flirting with the help now?" Senior Chief Harlow stood near the coffee station, arms crossed, a smirk pulling at his lips. The other SEALs at his table chuckled. Vance flushed red and mumbled something apologetic as he hurried to join his team. Romy said nothing. She had learned years ago that silence was safer than confrontation. She simply continued serving, her face neutral, her hands steady, even as something hot and tight coiled in her chest. Later that morning, she noticed something during the team brief that bled through the walls. The SEALs were discussing patrol routes, sector coverage, potential threat areas. She heard one of them mention the eastern perimeter, the northern access road, the village 3 kilometers south. Nobody mentioned the ridgeline. She found herself speaking before she could stop herself. The intel brief mentioned probing attacks on other compounds. She said to the nearest SEAL, a petty officer whose name she knew was Thornton. "Have you considered overwatch positions to the north? That ridgeline at 800 meters would give direct line of sight to the entire compound." Thornton stared at her, as if she had sprouted a second head. Harlow, who had overheard, stepped closer with a cold smile. "Stick to the stove, Cookie," he said. "Leave the tactics to people who actually know what they are doing." The mess hall went quiet. Every eye turned to witness her humiliation. Romy felt their stares like physical weight, pressing down on her shoulders, her chest, her throat. She nodded once and returned to the galley without another word. Doc Okafor found her there an hour later, scrubbing pots that were already clean. The corpsman leaned against the doorframe, watching with knowing eyes. "That was a solid observation," Doc said quietly. "The ridgeline. You are right that it is a blind spot." Romy kept scrubbing. "Does not matter. Nobody listens to the cook." Doc stepped closer. "Where did you learn to think like that?" Tactical assessment is not exactly in the culinary specialist training pipeline. For a long moment, Romy did not answer. Then, without looking up, she spoke. "My father was a competitive shooter. Long-range precision. He taught me everything he knew. I grew up on ranges, reading wind, calculating distance, understanding terrain." Doc waited. "I have qualified expert on every weapon cycle since I joined the Navy," Romy continued. "I applied twice for rating conversion. Master at arms. Something where I could actually use what I know. Denied both times. Personnel needs. The Navy needed cooks." The bitterness in her voice surprised even herself. That night, after dinner service, Romy walked the compound perimeter alone. She told herself it was for exercise, for fresh air, but her feet carried her to Tower 4, the northwestern guard post with the clearest view of the surrounding terrain. She stood there in the darkness, studying the ridgeline. 847 meters. She had paced it off weeks ago, out of habit, out of the compulsion to know distances that had been drilled into her since childhood. Wind from the northeast tonight, maybe 6 knots. Clear sky. Good visibility. A voice came from behind her. You see it too. She spun to find Master Chief Theodore Grayson standing in the shadows. Gray, as everyone called him, was the oldest SEAL at Sentinel, a living legend who had moved into a training and advisory role. He rarely spoke to anyone outside the team, and he had certainly never spoken to her. The ridgeline, he continued. Perfect overwatch position. Nobody is watching it. Romy did not know how to respond. Gray stepped closer, his weathered face unreadable. I have seen your qualification scores, Castellanos. All of them. Every range, every cycle, every duty station. You shoot better than half my operators. Her throat tightened. How do you know that? Because I recommended you for a program 4 years ago. Sniper School Pipeline. Someone killed the paperwork before it ever reached review. The words hit her like a physical blow. For years of wondering why her applications went nowhere, why doors kept closing, why she remained trapped in a rating she had never wanted. Who? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Gray shook his head. Does not matter now. What matters is what you do with what you know. He turned to leave, then paused. Whatever happens, Castellanos, trust what you see. Trust what you know. He disappeared into the darkness, leaving her alone with the ridgeline and the weight of stolen years. And somewhere in those rocks, 847 meters away, the watchers continued their work. The next morning arrived with a tension Romy could feel in her bones. The SEALs moved differently at breakfast, their conversations shorter, their eyes harder. Something had changed overnight. Intel updates, she guessed. Threat level shifting. She served food and watched, as she always did. Harlow huddled with his senior operators at the corner table, their voices too low to carry. Lieutenant Commander Thresh, the compound commander, moved between the command building and the communications shack 3 times before 0700. Nobody told the cook anything, but Romy had learned to read atmospheres the way her father had taught her to read wind. Something was coming. After breakfast, she found herself in the back storage area of the galley, conducting inventory she had already completed twice that week. Her hands moved automatically through crates of supplies while her mind worked through possibilities. Increased enemy activity. Probing attacks. The ridgeline nobody was watching. Her fingers brushed the dusty rifle case in the corner. She stopped, looked around. The storage area was empty, the galley quiet in the lull between meals. Before she could talk herself out of it, she knelt and opened the case. The M40A1 lay inside, older but well-maintained by whoever had left it behind. Her hands moved without conscious thought, clearing the weapon, checking the bore, inspecting the action. The movements were automatic, drilled into her through thousands of repetitions over decades of practice. For seconds, the rifle was clean, functional, ready. She was closing the case when a shadow fell across the doorway. Doc Okafor stood there, arms crossed, watching with an expression Romy could not read. That was not recreational handling, Doc said quietly. That was muscle memory. Professional muscle memory. Romy said nothing. There was nothing to say. Doc stepped into the storage room and let the door swing shut behind her. Who are you, Castellanos? Really? The question hung in the air. Romy sat back on her heels, the rifle case between them like evidence at a trial. I'm exactly who my records say I am, she finally answered. Culinary specialist 2nd class. 11 years in the Navy. Assigned to feed operators who do not know I exist. Doc shook her head. I have seen a lot of sailors handle weapons. What you just did was not standard qualification training. That was something else. Romy met her eyes. My father was a precision rifle competitor. National level. He started teaching me when I was 6 years old. By the time I was 16, I was out scoring adults at regional matches. She paused, the old frustration rising in her throat. I joined the Navy to serve my country. I wanted combat ratings. They put me in the galley and told me that was where I was needed. And you just accepted that? The question stung because it was fair. I tried, Romy said. Applications, requests, formal appeals. Nothing worked. After a while, you stop fighting walls that will not move. Doc was quiet for a moment. Then she said, that observation you made yesterday. The ridgeline. You were right. I overheard Thornton mention it to Harlow after you left. Harlow shut him down. Said he was not going to take tactical advice from help. Romy laughed bitterly. Of course he did. The compound alarm shattered the moment. Both women froze, then moved. Doc sprinted toward the medical station while Romy secured the rifle case and ran for the galley entrance. Outside, she could see SEALs pouring from the barracks, weapons ready, moving toward defensive positions. It was a drill, a readiness exercise called by Lieutenant Commander Thresh to test response times. The all-clear came within minutes, and the compound settled back into its routine with grumbled complaints and dark humor. But Romy noticed something the others missed. During the chaos, she had instinctively scanned the northern ridgeline, and, for just a moment, she had seen a reflection. Glass. Optics. Someone watching. She reported it to the watch commander. You are seeing things, Cookie, he said with a dismissive wave. Probably just a herder with binoculars checking on goats. Go back to your kitchen. She went, but she did not stop watching. That evening, Harlow held court in the mess hall, regaling his team with stories from past deployments. Romy worked the serving line for dinner, invisible as always, until Harlow decided to make her visible. Hey, Cookie, he called out, loud enough for everyone to hear. I heard you've been giving tactical advice to my operators. He grinned, playing to his audience. Maybe tomorrow you can brief us on the mission. Give us the benefit of your culinary expertise. Laughter rippled through the room. Romy felt heat rise in her face, but kept her expression neutral. Or maybe, Harlow continued, you should stick to what you know. The eggs were a little dry this morning. Focus on that. More laughter. Romy said nothing. She finished serving, cleaned her station, and retreated to the galley while the jokes continued behind her. Alone in the kitchen, she gripped the edge of the steel counter until her knuckles went white. Her hands were trembling, not from fear, from rage. 12 years. 12 years of being dismissed, overlooked, diminished. 12 years of knowing she was capable of more and being told to stay in her lane. And now, when she could see danger that others were missing, nobody would listen because she was just the cook. She thought about the rifle in the storage room. She thought about the ridgeline. She thought about the reflection she had seen, the watchers who were counting guards and timing rotations. And she thought about what would happen if she was right and nobody believed her until it was too late. Outside the galley window, the sun set over the Syrian desert, painting the ridgeline in shades of red and gold. 847 meters of rock and shadow, hiding whatever was coming next. Dawn broke gray and heavy over FOB Sentinel. Romy stood at the galley window, watching vehicles being loaded in the motor pool. Today was the day. The mission she had overheard pieces of was finally happening. A high-value target in a town 18 kilometers south. Most of the SEAL team would be gone for hours, maybe longer. She counted the operators climbing into vehicles. 18 men. That would leave barely a dozen personnel at the compound, including support staff. A skeleton crew defending a base that someone had been watching for days. The convoy rolled out at 0630. Romy watched until the dust settled and the gates closed behind them. Breakfast service was quiet. Only 12 people to feed now, and half of them were too tense to eat. Among those who remained were Senior Chief Harlow, nursing a knee injury that had kept him from the mission, Doc Okafor, Master Chief Gray, young Vance, and a handful of others. Harlow was in a foul mood. Being left behind while his team went operational clearly wounded his pride. He sat alone at his usual table, glaring at nothing, radiating hostility that kept everyone at a distance. Romy cleared plates and said nothing, but her mind was racing. The timing of this mission felt wrong. Enemy activity had been increasing for weeks, probing attacks on other compounds. And now, the moment the bulk of their fighting force left, the compound sat vulnerable and exposed. She found Doc Okafor in the medical station, restocking supplies. "Something is wrong," Romy said without preamble. "The timing of this mission, the enemy activity, that ridgeline I keep seeing movement on." Doc paused her work. "You really believe something is coming?" "I know something is coming. I can feel it." Doc studied her for a long moment. Then she nodded. "I will talk to Thresh. See if I can get him to increase the watch." She left. 20 minutes later, she returned with a grim expression. He said he appreciates the concern, but does not have the personnel to double coverage based on the instincts of a cook. His words, not mine. Romy closed her eyes. Of course. She spent the rest of the morning doing what she could, checking sight lines from different positions in the compound, noting which defensive positions had clear views of the northern ridgeline and which had blind spots, memorizing distances, angles, cover points. All the things she had been trained to notice, and nobody wanted her to report. At 1100, she tried one more time. She approached the command building, where Harlow was reviewing communications logs. He looked up as she entered, his expression souring immediately. "Senior Chief," she began, "I need to report a potential security concern." Harlow leaned back in his chair. "Let me guess. The ridgeline again. I saw optical reflection yesterday during the drill. Someone is watching this compound. With the team gone, we are vulnerable to a coordinated attack. If the enemy has been tracking our patterns, they know exactly how thin our coverage is right now." Harlow stood slowly, his size suddenly intimidating in the small room. He walked toward her until he was close enough that she could smell the coffee on his breath. "Listen to me very carefully, Cookie. I've been doing this job for 15 years. I have led operations in 6 different countries. I have combat experience you cannot even imagine. And you think you're going to walk in here and tell me how to defend this compound?" Romy held her ground. "I'm telling you what I observed. You're a cook." Harlow jabbed a finger toward the door. "Your job is to make sure my food is hot and my coffee is fresh. That is it. You do not get to play operator because you watch some movies and think you understand tactics." He stepped even closer. "If I hear one more word about ridgelines or security concerns or anything else outside your lane, I will have you written up for insubordination and shipped to the worst duty station I can find. Are we clear?" "Crystal," Romy said quietly. She left the command building with her hands balled into fists at her sides. The rage was back, hotter than before, but beneath it was something else. Fear, not for herself, for everyone at this compound who was about to learn a terrible lesson about what happened when warnings went unheeded. She returned to the galley and tried to focus on lunch prep. Yasmin, the young Syrian woman who helped in the kitchen, noticed her tension. "You are worried," Yasmin said in her careful English. "I can see it." Romy forced a smile. "Just a long day." But Yasmin shook her head. "I grew up in this war. I know what worry looks like. You see something others do not." Out of everyone at FOB Sentinel, the teenage kitchen helper was the first to actually believe her. Romy squeezed her shoulder. "If anything happens, anything at all, you hide in the back storage room. The walls are reinforced. You stay there until I come for you. Understand?" Yasmin nodded, eyes wide. That afternoon, Romy made one final trip. She walked to Tower 4 and climbed the ladder to the observation post. The guard on duty barely acknowledged her. She spent 10 minutes studying the ridgeline through borrowed binoculars, memorizing every rock formation, every shadow, every possible position where a shooter might hide. 847 meters. Wind from the northeast, 8 knots today. Temperature dropping as evening approached. Humidity low. She was still calculating when the first mortar round screamed out of the sky and turned the motor pool into a fountain of fire. The explosion threw Romy against the tower railing. Heat washed over her face as the motor pool erupted in flames. Vehicles twisted into burning wreckage in the span of a heartbeat. Before she could process what was happening, the second mortar hit the eastern barracks. Then a third struck near the communications shack. They knew exactly where to hit. They had been watching long enough to map every critical point. Romy half climbed, half fell down the tower ladder. Around her, the compound had become chaos. Alarms screamed. Men shouted. Gunfire erupted from the perimeter walls as enemy fighters emerged from positions they had prepared in advance, pouring fire into the base from 3 directions. And from the northern ridgeline, 847 meters away, a sniper began his work. The first shot took down a defender on the eastern wall. The second caught a sailor running for cover near the command building. Romy saw both men fall and understood immediately what was happening. The enemy had Overwatch. They had the high ground, the superior position, and a marksman who was systematically eliminating anyone who tried to organize a defense. She ran for the galley. Inside, Yasmin was frozen near the prep station, eyes wide with terror as explosions shook the walls. Romy grabbed her by the shoulders. "Storage room. Now. Do not come out until I come for you." The girl nodded frantically and ran. Romy watched her disappear into the reinforced back room, then turned to face what was coming. Through the galley window, she could see the compound dissolving into desperate pockets of resistance. Doc Okafor had dragged a wounded man behind the medical station and was working on him under fire. Vance was pinned near the western wall, returning fire with one hand while blood streamed from his shoulder. Harlow was shouting orders near the command building, trying to coordinate a defense that was falling apart around him. And every time someone moved into the open, the Ridgeline sniper put them down or drove them back into cover. Romy saw Master Chief Gray making his way toward Tower 4, the only position with a clear line of sight to the enemy Overwatch. He was limping badly, an old injury flaring under stress, but he moved with purpose. He understood what needed to happen. He was halfway there when the sniper found him. The round took him in the left thigh and dropped him hard. He crawled the remaining distance to the tower base, but could not climb, could only lie there, bleeding, while the enemy marksman continued to control the battlefield. Romy watched from the galley doorway. Her people were dying. The people who ignored her, dismissed her, mocked her. They were being picked apart by a shooter they could not see and could not reach, and there was nothing any of them could do about it. Nothing any of them could do. She turned and walked into the storage room. Yasmin was huddled in the corner, hands over her ears. Romy moved past her to the dusty rifle case she had opened just yesterday. The M40A1 came out of the case like an old friend. She checked the action, confirmed the bore was clear, loaded a magazine with steady hands. For seconds. Muscle memory. 25 years of training compressed into movements so automatic they required no thought at all. Yasmin stared at her. "You are not just a cook." "No," Romy said quietly. "I am not." She moved to the galley door and assessed the route to Tower 4. 60 meters of open ground, partially covered by burning vehicles and scattered debris. The enemy sniper would see her. He would try to stop her. She did not care. Outside, the battle raged. Harlow had managed to rally a small group behind the command building, but they were pinned and taking fire from multiple angles. 2 more defenders were down. The sniper on the ridgeline had complete control. Romy took a breath. Then she ran. She moved fast and low, using every piece of cover, changing direction unpredictably. A round snapped past her head and buried itself in the wall behind her. Another kicked up dirt at her feet. The sniper had seen her, was tracking her, but she was not moving like a cook. She was moving like someone who had trained for this, who had prepared for this, who had been waiting her entire life for a moment exactly like this. She reached Tower 4 and found Gray propped against the base, his leg wrapped in a hasty tourniquet he had applied himself. Blood soaked through the fabric. His face was pale, but his eyes were sharp. "Took you long enough. Castellanos," he said. Romy knelt beside him. "I need to get up there." Gray nodded toward the ladder. "Then get up there. I will cover you from here." He drew his sidearm with a bloody hand and aimed toward the eastern perimeter, where enemy fighters were trying to breach the wire. Romy did not hesitate. She slung the rifle across her back and climbed. The observation platform at the top of Tower 4 was small and exposed. She crawled into position, keeping low, and brought the M40A1 to her shoulder. The scope was old but functional. She found a ridgeline, scanned the rocks, search for the enemy sniper who had been killing her people. There, a shadow that did not belong, a shape that was too still, too deliberate. 847 meters away, the enemy marksman was settling into position for another shot. Romy placed her crosshairs on target and began to breathe. The world narrowed to the circle of her scope. Everything else fell away. The gunfire, the explosions, the screaming. None of it existed inside the bubble of focus that had been trained into her since childhood. There was only the target, the distance, the wind, and the math. 847 meters. Wind from the northeast, 8 knots. Temperature, 62 degrees. Humidity low. She calculated the adjustments automatically, dialing the scope with fingers that did not tremble. The enemy sniper was good. He had positioned himself in a natural depression between two rock formations, his body shielded, only his rifle and scope visible. A professional, someone who had done this before and understood how to minimize exposure while maximizing lethality. But he had made one mistake. He thought he was the only predator on this battlefield. Romy settled her breathing into the rhythm her father had taught her when she was 7 years old. For counts in, hold for 2. For counts out, hold for 2. Her heart rate dropped. Her muscles relaxed. The crosshairs steadied on target. She could take the shot now. End it. But she hesitated, not from fear, but from tactical assessment. The angle was wrong. She could see his rifle, his scope, the shadow of his head, but not enough of his body for a guaranteed kill shot. If she fired and missed, or only wounded him, he would reposition. She might not find him again before he found her. Below, the battle continued. Harlow and his small group were making a push toward the medical station, trying to reach Doc Okafor and the wounded. They had no idea a sniper was about to cut them down. Romy made a decision. She shifted her aim away from the ridgeline and found the 3 enemy fighters who were flanking Harlow's position. They were moving through the debris near the motor pool, using the burning vehicles as cover, about to catch the defenders in a crossfire. First shot, 212 meters. The lead fighter dropped. Second shot, bolt action, smooth and fast. The second fighter spun and fell. Third shot, the last man tried to run. He made it 4 steps. Below, Harlow froze. He had seen the fighters fall, had heard the distinctive crack of a precision rifle. His head turned, searching for the source, and found Tower 4. Found her. For a moment, their eyes met across the chaos. Romy could not read his expression at that distance, but she could imagine it. Confusion. Disbelief. The cook was in his sniper perch, holding a rifle, and she had just dropped 3 enemies with 3 shots. She did not have time to enjoy his shock. A round slammed into the tower wall 6 inches from her head. Concrete fragments sprayed across her face, drawing blood. The enemy sniper had seen her muzzle flash. He knew where she was now. The duel had begun. Romy dropped flat against the platform, making herself as small as possible. Another round cracked overhead, close enough that she felt the pressure wave. He was fast, accurate, and he had the advantage of prepared position while she was exposed on an elevated platform. But she had something he did not. She had spent days studying that ridgeline. Every rock, every shadow, every possible hiding spot. She knew exactly where he had to be to have the angle he was shooting from. She rolled to her left, putting a sandbag between herself and his line of fire, and brought her scope back up. The depression between the rock formations. He had shifted slightly, repositioning after his shots, but he was still there, still in the same general area. "Come on," she whispered. "Show me something." Gray's voice drifted up from below, weak but steady. "He is going to wait you out. Make you move first." "I know. Then do not play his game. Make him play yours." She understood what he meant. The enemy sniper was patient, disciplined. He would sit in that depression for hours if necessary, waiting for her to make a mistake. She needed to force him out of position. Romy scanned the compound below. Harlow's group had reached the medical station. Doc Okafor was working on 3 wounded now. Vance had found better cover and was providing suppressing fire toward the eastern breach. The defenders were holding, barely, but they could not hold forever. She needed to end this. An idea formed. Risky, possibly stupid, but was the only place she had. She keyed the radio she had taken from the tower guard station. All stations, this is Tower 4. I need suppressing fire on the northern ridgeline. Everything you have. On my mark. Static. Then Harlow's voice, incredulous. Who the hell is this? This is Petty Officer Castellanos, Senior Chief. The cook. And I need you to trust me for the next 30 seconds, or we all die. Silence. The longest 3 seconds of her life. Then Harlow's voice again, tight and hard. All stations, suppressing fire on the northern ridgeline. On her mark. Romy took a breath. Mark. The compound erupted. Every weapon that could be brought to bear opened up on the ridgeline. Rounds pinging off rocks, kicking up dust, filling the air with chaos and noise and fury. And in that moment of confusion, the enemy sniper did exactly what she needed him to do. He flinched. He shifted. He moved just enough to avoid a lucky ricochet. And he exposed himself for exactly 1.3 seconds. Romy fired. The rifle bucked against her shoulder. The round left the barrel at 2,800 feet per second, beginning its long arc across 847 meters of Syrian desert. 1.3 seconds. That was how long the bullet would fly. That was how long she had to wait to know if she had just saved her people or doomed them. The enemy sniper was moving when the round arrived. Her aim had been center mass, but his shift changed the geometry. The bullet caught him in the shoulder instead of the chest, spinning him backward into the rocks. Hit, but not a kill. Romy cycled the bolt and found him again through her scope. He had dropped behind cover, wounded but alive. Blood on the rocks. His rifle had fallen from his grip, lying in the open 2 feet from his position. He was out of the fight, but he was not dead. She kept her crosshairs on the rocks where he had fallen, waiting for movement. Below, the suppressing fire tapered off as defenders realized something had changed. The enemy fighters who had been pushing toward the compound hesitated, looking toward the ridgeline, waiting for guidance that was not coming. Their overwatch was down. The battle had shifted. Gray called up from below. Did you get him? Wounded. He is out of position, but still breathing. Then finish it. Romy hesitated. Through her scope, she could see the enemy sniper crawling toward his rifle. Slow, labor movements. His left arm hung useless. Blood trailed behind him on the rocks. He was trying to get back in the fight. She could end him now. One more shot. Simple. Clean. But something stopped her. Not mercy. Not hesitation. Something tactical that nagged at the edge of her awareness. Movement. Behind the wounded sniper. 2 more figures emerging from concealed positions further up the ridge. They had been hidden, held in reserve, and now they were moving to recover their fallen marksman. Romy shifted her aim. The first figure was carrying a weapon. Hostile. She fired. He dropped. The second figure froze, then dove for cover. She tracked him, waiting for a shot that never came. He stayed hidden, smart enough not to expose himself. The wounded sniper had reached his rifle. His good hand closed around the stock. He was trying to bring it to bear despite his shattered shoulder. Determination or desperation, it did not matter. He was still dangerous. Romy fired again. This time she did not miss. The ridge line went quiet. She stayed in position for another 60 seconds, scanning for additional threats, making sure no more surprises were hiding in those rocks. Nothing moved. The overwatch position had been neutralized. Below, the tide of battle was turning. Without sniper support, the enemy fighters were exposed and outgunned. Harlow had rallied the defenders into a coordinated counterattack, pushing back toward the breached sections of perimeter. Vance, his wounded arm bound tight against his chest, was leading a team to secure the eastern wall. They were going to hold. They were going to survive. Romy finally allowed herself to breathe. She lowered the rifle and looked at her hands. Steady. No tremor. 25 years of training had prepared her for this moment, and her body had performed exactly as it had been taught. The shaking would come later, she knew, when the adrenaline faded, when the reality of what she had done settled into her bones. For now, there was still work to do. She climbed down from the tower and found Gray where she had left him. His face was pale, his breathing shallow, but he managed to smile when he saw her. That was one hell of a shot, Castellanos. It was 3 shots, actually. He laughed, then winced as the movement jarred his wounded leg. Smartass. Help me up. She got him to his feet, his arm draped over her shoulders, and helped him limp toward the medical station. Around them, the sounds of battle were fading. Sporadic gunfire, shouted commands, the moans of wounded men. Doc Okafor looked up as they approached. Her hands were red to the wrists, her face drawn with exhaustion, but her eyes widened when she saw Romy supporting Gray. Castellanos, I heard what happened on the radio. How was you up there? Romy eased Gray onto a stretcher. He needs attention. Gunshot wound to the left thigh. Tourniquet has been on for approximately 15 minutes. Doc nodded and went to work, but she kept glancing at Romy, seeing her differently now, seeing her for the first time. Harlow appeared at the edge of the medical station. He stood there for a long moment, staring at Romy with an expression she could not read. Then he turned and walked away without a word. She watched him go. There would be a reckoning later. Questions to answer. Explanations to give. But right now, none of that mattered. She walked back to the galley. Inside, she found Yasmin still huddled in the storage room, tears streaming down her face. When she saw Romy, she let out a sob and ran to her. I heard shooting. So much shooting. I thought you were dead. Romy held her. I told you I would come back for you. She stayed there for a long moment, holding the trembling girl, letting the adrenaline finally begin to fade. Through the window, she could see defenders securing the perimeter, smoke rising from the motor pool, bodies being collected. They had survived, because she had seen what others refused to see, because she had been ready when the moment came. The cook had made her shot, and nothing at FOB Sentinel would ever be the same. The mission element returned at 1847, their vehicles tearing through the gates in a cloud of dust and urgency. They had heard fragments over radio. Attack on Sentinel. Casualties. Sniper engagement. They had pushed through their own firefight to get back, expecting to find a compound overrun. Instead, they found their people alive. Wounded, shaken, but alive. Lieutenant Commander Thresh was the first out of the lead vehicle. He surveyed the damage with hard eyes. The burning motor pool, the shattered barracks, the bodies lined near the medical station covered in tarps. 3 dead, 7 wounded. It could have been so much worse. Report. He barked at Harlow. The senior chief stood straighter, but something in his posture had changed. Some of the swagger was gone. Coordinated assault, sir. Mortar fire followed by ground assault from 3 directions. They had sniper overwatch on the northern ridgeline. Had us pinned down and taking casualties. Thresh frowned. How did you neutralize the overwatch? Harlow did not answer immediately. His jaw worked, as if the words were fighting to stay inside. Finally, he spoke. Petty Officer Castellanos, sir. The culinary specialist. She engaged and eliminated the enemy sniper from Tower 4. 847 meters. Thresh stared at him. The cook. Yes, sir. The compound went quiet. SEALs who had just returned from their own battle looked around in confusion, searching for context, trying to understand what they were hearing. Where is she now? Thresh asked. Harlow pointed toward the galley. She went back to check on her assistant, and then she started prepping dinner. Thresh blinked. She did what? She said people still need to eat, sir. For a long moment, the lieutenant commander said nothing. Then he turned and walked toward the galley, his boots crunching on debris and spent brass. He found Romy inside, standing at the prep station, slicing vegetables. Her uniform was dirty and torn. There was dried blood on her face from the concrete fragments that had sprayed her in the tower. But her hands moved with the same steady precision they always did, knife work clean and efficient. Petty Officer Castellanos. She looked up. Sir. Thresh studied her. This small woman with tired eyes and calloused hands, standing in a kitchen that smelled of onions and cumin, looking nothing like the warrior who had turned the tide of battle 3 hours ago. Senior Chief Harlow tells me you engaged an enemy sniper at over 800 meters and eliminated him along with multiple additional hostiles. Yes, sir. He tells me you coordinated suppressing fire over radio and directed the defensive response. I provided tactical input, sir. Senior Chief Harlow led the defense. Thresh shook his head slowly. Where did you learn to shoot like that? My father, sir. He was a competitive precision rifle shooter. He trained me from the time I was 6 years old. And the Navy put you in a kitchen. It was not a question. Romy did not answer. Thresh pulled a chair from nearby and sat down heavily. Around them, the sounds of the compound recovering filtered through the walls. Vehicles moving, men shouting, the controlled chaos of aftermath. I reviewed your service record after Harlow made his report, Thresh said. 12 years in the Navy. Expert qualification every cycle. Multiple requests for rating conversion. All denied. Yes, sir. He leaned forward. I also found a recommendation from 4 years ago. Sniper School Pipeline. It was submitted by Master Chief Grayson, who at the time was serving as an instructor at Dam Neck. That recommendation was killed before it ever reached the review board. Romy felt her chest tighten. She had suspected, ever since Gray told her about the buried paperwork, but hearing it confirmed was different. Do you know who killed it? She asked. Thresh nodded slowly. I have a good idea, but that is a conversation for another time. He stood. Right now, I need to debrief you properly, and then I need to figure out how to explain to my chain of command that a cook just made the shot of the year. He turned to leave, then paused at the door. For what is worth, Castellanos, I am sorry. The system failed you. It should not have taken an attack on this compound for someone to see what you could do. She met his eyes. I was always this person, sir. I was just never given the chance to prove it. He nodded once and left. Romy stood alone in the galley, knife still in her hand, vegetables half chopped on the cutting board. Through the window, she could see the compound coming back to life. Wounded being loaded for medevac. Perimeter being reinforced. SEALs gathering in small groups, talking quietly, glancing toward the galley with expressions she had never seen directed at her before. Curiosity, respect, disbelief. She returned to her cutting board and finished the vegetables. Dinner still needed to be made. The wounded who could eat would need their strength. The defenders who had held the line deserved a hot meal. That was her job, one of her jobs. Tonight, for the first time in 12 years, people would know she had another one. She was plating the first servings when Doc Okafor appeared in the doorway. The medevac bird is 10 minutes out. Gray is stable, but they are flying him to the hospital in Kuwait. He has to see you before he goes. Romy wiped her hands and followed Doc to the landing zone. Gray lay on a stretcher, his leg immobilized for running into his arm. He looked older than he had that morning, the pain etching new lines into his weathered face. But when he saw her, he smiled. There she is, the cook who could not miss. Romy knelt beside him. Thank you for believing in me, for recommending me all those years ago, even when it went nowhere. Gray reached out and gripped her hand with surprising strength. It did not go nowhere, Castellanos. It just took a while to arrive. He released her and reached into his pocket. I want you to have this. He pressed something in her palm, a small leather journal, worn soft with age. My spotter's journal, he said. From Vietnam. Every shot I ever made. Every lesson I ever learned. I have been waiting a long time to find someone worthy of it. Romy looked at the journal, then at him. I do not know what to say. Say you will keep shooting. Say you will not let them put you back in a box. The helicopter appeared on the horizon, rotors beating the air. Medics moved to prepare Gray for transport. I will, Romy said. I promise. Gray nodded, satisfied. Then he was lifted away, carried toward the bird that would take him to surgery and recovery and a future she hoped would be kind to him. She stood on the landing zone until the helicopter was a speck in the darkening sky. Then she walked back to the galley to finish serving dinner. There was still work to do. The formal debrief lasted 3 hours. Romy sat in the command building, answering questions from Thresh, from the intelligence officer, from a senior chief she had never seen before who had been flown in specifically for this interview. They wanted every detail, the timeline, her observations in the days leading up to the attack, her decision to retrieve the rifle, every shot she had taken, measured and cataloged. She gave them everything, the ridgeline she had reported, the optical reflection she had seen, the warnings that had been dismissed. She kept her voice neutral, professional, but she saw the officers exchanging glances as the picture came together. The cook had seen the attack coming. The cook had tried to warn them. And when no one listened, the cook had handled it herself. When the debrief finally ended, Thresh asked her to wait outside. She sat on a bench near the command building, watching the compound slowly return to normal operations. Repairs had already begun on the damaged structures. The perimeter had been reinforced. Life at FOB Sentinel was continuing because that was what military life did. It continued. 20 minutes later, Thresh emerged. He sat down beside her on the bench, which surprised her. Officers did not usually sit with enlisted culinary specialists. "I have been on the phone with Theater Command," he said. "Your actions today saved this compound. Saved lives. That is going to be recognized." Romy nodded but said nothing. "I am recommending you for the Bronze Star with Combat V," Thresh continued. "Valor under fire. It is the least of what you deserve." She turned to look at him. "With respect, sir, I do not need a medal. I need a chance." Thresh met her eyes. "Explain." Romy took a breath. "I have been in the Navy for 12 years. I have spent every one of those years proving myself on the range, submitting applications, requesting transfers. Every time, the answer was no. Personnel needs. Mission requirements. Someone, somewhere decided I was more valuable making eggs than doing what I was actually trained to do." She paused, choosing her next words carefully. "I'm not angry about today. I did my job, both of my jobs, but I'm tired of being invisible. I'm tired of having skills that no one wants to see. If today proved anything, it is that I belong somewhere other than a galley." Thresh was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "I cannot promise anything. Rating conversions are above my authority. But I can make calls. I can advocate. And I can make sure that what happened here today goes into your record in a way that cannot be ignored. That is all I am asking, sir." He stood. "Get some rest, Castellanos. You have earned it." She did not rest. There was still too much to do. She returned to the galley and cleaned until every surface gleamed. She prepped breakfast for the next morning. She checked on Yasmin, who had finally stopped shaking and was sleeping in the back storage room, unwilling to leave the place where she had felt safe. It was nearly midnight when a shadow appeared in the galley doorway. Harlow stood there, his bulk filling the frame. He looked different than he had that morning. Smaller somehow. The arrogance that had always radiated from him seemed dimmed. Romy straightened but did not speak. She waited. Harlow stepped inside. His eyes moved around the galley, taking in the clean counters, the prepped ingredients, the quiet order she maintained even in the aftermath of chaos. "I owe you an apology," he said finally. The words came out rough, like they were fighting him on the way out. Romy remained silent. "I dismissed you, mocked you, told you to stay in your lane." He shook his head. "I was wrong. About all of it." She could have accepted the apology, could have been gracious, made it easy for him, smoothed over the years of humiliation with a simple acknowledgement. But something in her refused. "Why?" she asked instead. Harlow frowned. "Why what? Why did you treat me like that? I never did anything to you. I just did my job and tried to help. So why?" He was quiet for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was lower, harder. "For years ago, I was at a joint training exercise. Some support sailor from another command outshot me on the range. Made me look bad in front of my team. I told myself it was a fluke, but it ate at me." He met her eyes. "When I saw your qualification scores come across my desk, when Grayson submitted that recommendation for you, I killed it. I told myself it was because we did not need cooks thinking they were operators. But that was not the real reason." Romy felt cold. "You sabotaged my career because of your ego." Yes. The word hung in the air between them. 12 years of her life. Opportunities stolen. Dreams deferred. All because one man could not handle being outperformed. She should have been furious. Part of her was. But mostly, she just felt tired. "I'm not going to tell you it is okay," she said quietly. "Because it is not. You took something from me that I cannot get back. I know, but I'm also not going to let it define me." She straightened, meeting his eyes directly. "I am more than what you try to make me. I proved that today, and I will keep proving it, whether you support me or not." Harlow nodded slowly. "For what it is worth, I am going to support you. I am writing a recommendation for your rating conversion. Full endorsement. It will not fix what I did, but it is a start." He turned to leave, then paused. "That shot you made. 847 meters, wounded sniper, trying to reposition, under fire. He shook his head. I have seen a lot of shooters in my career. That was one of the best shots I have ever witnessed. Then he was gone. Romy stood alone in the galley, processing what had just happened. An apology, a confession, a promise of support from the man who had held her back for years. It was not forgiveness. She was not sure she would ever fully forgive him. But it was something, a crack in the wall that had contained her for so long. She turned off the galley lights and walked to her rack. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new questions, new possibilities. For the first time in 12 years, she was ready for all of them. Word spread through FOB Sentinel like fire through dry brush. By morning, everyone knew. The cook had made an 800-meter shot. The cook had dropped an enemy sniper. The cook had saved the compound while the operators were away. Romy felt the change the moment she stepped into the galley to start breakfast. SEALs who had never acknowledged her existence now nodded as they passed. Some said good morning. A few used her actual name. It was disorienting. 12 years of invisibility erased in a single afternoon. Vance found her during the breakfast rush. His arm was in a proper sling now, the wound cleaned and dressed. He looked tired but alive, which was more than could be said for the man they had lost. Castellanos, he said, I wanted to thank you. That flanking team you dropped near the motor pool. They were about to hit Senior Chief's position. You save a lot of lives with those shots. I saw the threat. I eliminated it. He shook his head. You make it sound simple. It was not simple. She allowed herself a small smile. No, it was not. Vance hesitated, then asked the question she knew everyone wanted answered. Where did you learn to shoot like that? I mean, I heard you tell the commander about your father, but that does not explain everything. You moved under fire like you had done it before. You coordinated that suppressing fire like you had trained for it. I did train for it, she said. Every chance I got. Unofficial range time. Reading manuals. Studying tactics. She shrugged. Just because nobody gave me the opportunity did not mean I stopped preparing for it. Vance stared at her for a long moment. Then he laughed, a sound of genuine disbelief. You're something else, Castellanos. That afternoon, Thresh called a compound-wide formation. Everyone who could stand gathered in the central courtyard, facing the command building. Romy stood with the support personnel toward the back, where she had always stood. Thresh walked to the front and surveyed the assembled sailors. His face was grave. 2 days ago, this compound was attacked by a coordinated enemy force. We lost 3 of our brothers. 7 more were wounded. The enemy had prepared positions, superior numbers, and sniper overwatch that had us pinned and taking casualties. He paused. We survived because of the actions of one sailor. A sailor who saw the threat before anyone else. Who tried to warn us. Who, when her warnings went unheeded, took matters into her own hands and eliminated the enemy sniper that was killing our people. Romy felt every eye in the formation turned toward her. Petty Officer Second Class Ramona Castellanos, Thresh called. Front and center. She walked forward on legs that felt suddenly unsteady. The distance from the back of the formation to the front seemed impossibly long. Every step carried the weight of 12 years of being told she did not belong. She reached the front and stood at attention. Thresh turned to face her. Petty Officer Castellanos, it is my honor to inform you that you have been recommended for the Bronze Star with Combat Distinguishing Device for Valor Under Fire. Your actions on the day of the attack directly saved the lives of multiple service members and were instrumental in the successful defense of this compound. He stepped closer, lowering his voice so only she could hear. I also received word this morning. Your request for rating conversion has been approved. Expedited processing. You will report to assessment and selection for Special Warfare Combatant Craft Crewman in 30 days. Romy felt her breath catch. SWCC. Special Warfare. The door that had been slammed in her face for over a decade was finally opening. Thresh stepped back and raised his voice for the formation. I want everyone here to remember what happened. Remember that capability can come from unexpected places. Remember that every member of this team has value, whether they carry a rifle or a spatula. And remember that Petty Officer Castellanos was ready when we needed her most. He turned to the formation. Dismissed. The formation broke apart, but Romy did not move. She stood there, processing, trying to make the moment feel real. Doc Okafor reached her first. The corpsman grabbed her in a fierce hug. You did it. You actually did it. I did not do anything. They approved the conversion. Doc pulled back, eyes bright. You did everything. You proved them wrong. All of them. Other sailors approached. Handshakes. Congratulations. Words of respect from people who had never spoken to her before. Even operators from the SEAL team offered nods of acknowledgement, which in their culture was equivalent to a standing ovation. When the crowd finally thinned, Romy walked to the edge of the compound and looked out at the northern ridgeline. The rocks where the enemy sniper had hidden were visible in the afternoon light, just shapes and shadows from this distance. 847 meters. The shot that had changed everything. She pulled out her phone and dialed a number she knew by heart. It rang twice before a familiar voice answered. Romy? Is everything okay? She smiled at the sound of her brother's voice. Mateo. Yeah, everything is okay. Better than okay. You sound different. What happened? She took a breath. I made a shot, little brother. And now I am coming to join you. Silence on the other end. Then Mateo's voice, thick with emotion. You got your conversion? I got my conversion. SWCC assessment in 30 days. She could hear him laughing, the sound of joy and disbelief mixing together. I knew it. I always knew you would find a way. Romy looked at the ridgeline one more time. It took a while, but I finally got my chance. They talked for another 10 minutes. About the attack, about his training, about the future that was finally opening up for both of them. When she hung up, the sun was setting over the Syrian desert, painting the sky in shades of gold and red. She walked back to the galley. There was still dinner to prepare. But for the first time in 12 years, she was cooking because she chose to, not because it was all she was allowed to be. The last week at FOB Sentinel passed in a blur of preparations and farewells. Romy trained every morning before dawn, pushing her body harder than ever. The SWCC pipeline was notoriously brutal, designed to break candidates who were not ready. She would not be one of them. She had waited too long for this opportunity to fail now. Between workouts and galley duties, she spent hours with Gray's journal. The old sniper had documented everything. Windage calculations, breeding technique, mental preparation rituals, notes on shots he had made and shots he had missed. Decades of wisdom compressed into worn leather pages. She memorized every word. Doc Okafor found her one evening, sitting behind the galley with the journal open on her knees. Still studying? Romy looked up. There's a lot to learn. Doc sat down beside her. You know you're already better than most of the people who will be in that pipeline with you. Being better is not enough. I have to be undeniable. Doc smiled. You already are. She pulled something from her pocket. A small patch, worn and faded. Navy anchor surrounded by medical symbols. I wanted to have this. It was my grandmother's. She was one of the first black women to serve as a Navy nurse in World War II. Spent her whole career proving she belonged. Romy took the patch carefully. Doc, I cannot accept this. You can, and you will. She put her hand over Romy's. My grandmother used to say that every generation has to kick down doors for the next one. You kicked down a door this week, Castellanos. That matters. Romy felt tears prick her eyes. She blinked them back. Thank you. For everything. Just promise me you will write, and that you will come back and visit once you are some hotshot special warfare operator. I promise. The night before her departure, the team threw her a dinner. In the galley. Her galley. It was Harlow's idea, which surprised everyone, including Romy. He had coordinated with the other SEALs, arranged for supplies, even helped set up tables in the space she had ruled for 11 months. The room was packed. Operators and support staff together, a mix that rarely happened at Sentinel. Vance had convinced someone to rig speakers, and music played softly in the background. The food was simple, dishes Romy had taught Yasmin to prepare, served by the people she had fed for so long. Yasmin herself moved through the crowd, refilling drinks, her eyes bright with pride. She had grown so much in the months since Romy had taken her under her wing. A scared girl becoming a confident young woman. You will take care of the galley? Romy asked her. Yasmin nodded solemnly. I will make you proud. You already have. As the evening wound down, Harlow stood and raised his glass. The room fell silent. I'm not good at speeches, he said. Most of you know that. But I have something to say tonight. He turned to face Romy directly. 11 months ago, a cook arrived at this compound. I did not learn her name. I did not care to. She was support staff, invisible beneath my notice. He paused. I was wrong. The room was utterly still. Petty Officer Castellanos saw threats that I missed. She tried to warn me, and I shut her down. When the attack came, she did not wait for permission. She did not ask for help. She climbed into that tower, and she made a shot that saved lives. My life included. He raised his glass higher. To Petty Officer Castellanos, the best cook we ever had, and the best shot most of us have ever seen. The room erupted, glasses raised. Cheers echoed off the galley walls. Romy stood in the middle of it all, overwhelmed by the moment, by the acceptance she had craved for so long. When the noise died down, she found her voice. Thank you, all of you. She looked around the room, meeting eyes that had once looked through her as if she did not exist. I spent 12 years being told what I could not be, being told to stay in my lane, being told that my skills did not matter because they did not fit the box someone else had put me in. She straightened. I'm not angry about that anymore, because every meal I cooked, every range session I squeezed in, every manual I studied when I should have been sleeping, it all led here. To this moment, to this chance. Her voice grew stronger. I do not know what happens next. The pipeline might break me. The assessment might wash me out. But whatever happens, I will know that I earned my shot. And I will know that when it mattered most, I did not miss. The applause that followed was different from before. Not celebratory, respectful. The acknowledgement of warriors recognizing one of their own. Later, after the crowd had thinned and the cleanup was done, Romy stood alone in the empty galley. The same galley where she had worked in obscurity for 11 months. The same galley where she had been mocked and dismissed. It looked different now. Smaller, like something she had already outgrown. She ran her hand along the steel counter one last time. Then she turned off the lights and walked away. Her transport left at 0600. A helicopter to the airfield, then a series of flights that would take her halfway around the world to a training facility where she would be tested like never before. She was ready. She had been ready for 12 years. Now the world was finally ready for her. 3 months later, the sun rose over the Virginia coastline as Romy settled into position on the firing range. The SWCC assessment had been everything she expected and worse. 12-hour days. Physical training that pushed her body to its breaking point. Technical evaluations. Psychological screening. Candidates half her age washing out around her, broken by the pressure. She had not broken. Now she lay on the cold ground, rifle steady, waiting for the range instructor to call the drill. Around her, the remaining candidates prepared for the final marksmanship evaluation. Cold bore shot, long range, difficult conditions, the kind of shot that separated special warfare operators from everyone else. Castellanos, the instructor, called. You're up. She moved to the primary position and settled behind her rifle. The target was 900 meters out, partially obscured by morning mist. Wind from the east, variable. Temperature dropping. Harder than Sentinel. Harder than the ridgeline. She did not care. Her breathing slowed. Her heart rate dropped. The world narrowed to the scope, the crosshairs, the distant target. She thought of her father teaching her to shoot in the Arizona desert when she was barely tall enough to hold a rifle. She thought of Gray, bleeding beside Tower 4, telling her to trust what she knew. She thought of every person who had told her no, who had dismissed her, who had tried to keep her small. Then she let it all go. The shot broke clean. The recoil pushed back. 900 meters away, the target registered a hit. Center mass. The instructor lowered his spotting scope. He looked at her with the expression she had seen on so many faces over the past 3 months. Surprise that kept transforming into respect. Where did you train, Castellanos? Romy stood and cleared her weapon. My father's backyard. In 11 months in a galley where nobody thought I could shoot. The instructor shook his head. Well, they were wrong. Yes, sir. They were. Graduation was held on a Friday afternoon. 42 candidates had started the pipeline. 11 remained. Romy stood among them, her new rating insignia gleaming on her collar, surrounded by men and women who had earned their place through the same crucible she had survived. The commanding officer gave a speech about honor, about service, about the legacy of special warfare. Romy listened with half an ear. Her attention was on the small group of guests gathered at the edge of the ceremony. Doc Okafor had taken leave to be there. She stood in her dress uniform, beaming like a proud sister. Vance had come too, his arm fully healed now, a new scar adding to his collection. He gave her a thumbs up when their eyes met. And there, at the back, standing apart from the others, was Harlow. He had traveled across the country. He had not told her he was coming. He stood at attention as the ceremony concluded, his face unreadable, and when Romy's name was called to receive her certificate, he raised his hand in a salute. Sharp, crisp, respectful. The gesture said everything his words never could. After the ceremony, Romy found a quiet moment to call her brother. Mateo had graduated BUD/S 2 weeks earlier. He was officially a Navy SEAL now, assigned to a team on the West Coast. You did it, he said, his voice thick with emotion. We did it, she corrected. Both of us. He laughed. Mom and Dad would be proud. You know that, right? She felt tears threaten and blinked them back. I know. The afternoon faded into evening. Guests departed. Graduates scattered to their new assignments. Romy received her orders. Report to Special Boat Team 20 for integration and advanced training. A new chapter. A new beginning. She was packing her gear in the barracks when a familiar voice came from the doorway. Took you long enough. She turned to find Gray standing there, leaning on a cane, his legs still recovering from the wound he had taken at Sentinel. He looked older than she remembered, but his eyes were sharp as ever. Master Chief. She crossed the room and embraced him carefully. What are you doing here? You think I would miss this? He pulled back and studied her face. I told you to trust what you know. Looks like you listened. I had a good teacher. Gray reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. I brought you something. A graduation gift. She opened it to find a challenge coin, worn smooth with age. On one side, a sniper's crosshairs. On the other, the words "one shot, one kill." It was mine, Gray said, from my first deployment. I want you to have it. Romy closed her hand around the coin. I will carry it always. He nodded, satisfied. Now go make some history, Castellanos. Show them what a cook can do. She smiled. I'm not a cook anymore, Master Chief. No. He grinned. You never really were. That night, Romy walked alone along the Virginia beach, listening to the waves crash against the shore. The moon hung low over the water, casting silver light across the sand. She thought about the journey that had brought her here. 12 years of waiting. 11 months of invisibility. One shot that changed everything. She thought about the people who had believed in her when she had almost stopped believing in herself. Gray. Document Vance. Even Harlow, in the end. And she thought about her father, who had put a rifle in her hands when she was 6 years old and taught her that precision was not just about hitting targets. It was about patience, discipline, trusting yourself when no one else did. She pulled out her phone and typed a message to Doc Okafor. Made it. Starting with the team next week. Thank you for everything. The response came seconds later. Never doubted you for a second. Go show them what you were made of. Romy smiled and slipped the phone back in her pocket. Tomorrow she would report to her new unit. Tomorrow she would begin proving herself all over again. Tomorrow the real work would start. But tonight she allowed herself to feel it. The pride, the satisfaction, the quiet joy of finally becoming who she had always known she could be. She was not the cook anymore. She was Petty Officer Second Class Ramona Castellanos. Special Warfare Combatant Craft Crewman. The woman who made the shot at Sentinel. And she was just getting started. If this story moved you, drop a comment about your favorite moment or character. Or tell us about someone you know whose real abilities were hidden, just waiting for the right moment to shine.